Yeah, see which
10 years monitoring.
A very warm welcome to you all. Thank you for joining again to Streaming School. It's lovely to have you all here for the third of today's lessons, where we move into drama. I get to welcome my very good friend, Mr. Gary Orban again. Hi, Gary. How are you?
Hi, Leon. How are you?
Yeah, just ignoring the big truck behind me. But yeah, it is what it is. Right, Gary, the screen's yours, and yeah, thank you very much again.
It's a pleasure. Nice to be here, and welcome everyone. My name's Gary Orban. You may have seen some of these videos before. This is my 9th lesson. I hope that you've gone back and seen some of the others. Today we've talked about acting, directing, and some elements of design. Last week we talked about lighting design, and today we're going to turn our attention to sound design. Okay, so theatre productions employ designers to get all those technical elements right. They work very closely with the directors, and one of the elements of the design that's vital, especially for larger productions, is sound design. Okay, so while I just get the slides open, can you please reflect on what is the role of a sound designer? What do they do before the production as well as during the production? What do they do in rehearsals as well as while the production is going on? And how much creative sort of ownership do they have of what's going on? Okay, so while I just present my screen, I hope you're thinking about how do we get sound, what does a sound designer do? And if I'm writing about sound design in my exam, what options do I have for creating something that helps with the mood, with the location, to set the scene and essentially communicate something wonderful to the audience? Okay, so this is lesson 7, I apologize. Lesson 9 is on the designer's toolkit and specifically looking at sound design. So what does a sound designer do? Let's look at this quote from one of the best drama schools in the country. It's the Royal Central School of Speech and Drama in London. And they're saying sound design. The sound designer is responsible for everything that you hear as part of the performance. A sound designer will create sound effects, will create more abstract sounds, sounds that are emotive, evocative of feelings, sounds that will suggest place, time, mood, atmosphere, and will decide when, at what volume level, for how long, and from where in the space the sounds are played as part of the performance. Okay, so it's really sound effects, music, what do we need, but also why do we need them? Are we trying to show that someone is outside? Are we trying to show that someone is miserable? Are we trying to show that something is moving further away from us or towards us? So all those are part of the decisions that a sound designer would make, and the sound designer would often do 2 jobs really. They'd be designing, they'd have that creative, let me source that sound effect or work out a bit of music or write a piece of music, and then during the show, they'll be operating a sound desk, which is what you see in front of you here. Lots of flashing buttons and faders and everything and computer screens. And so they will be in charge of what sounds are played when and operating them. In a big production, they might have someone else do that for them. But ultimately, they'll be responsible for getting it ready, designing it, and then implementing it during the production. Okay, we'll always think of exams in these sessions. So as a designer, explain your ideas for sound within this extract. As a sound designer, what do you want to communicate is the first thing there. Okay, so what are your ideas? But really, why? Why do you want them and what are you trying to communicate? So for example, what do you want your production to say? Do you want that in a play that's about, it's sort of a day in the life of a man in his 40s, maybe we see his journey to work, okay? Do we want to show that the location he lived in is fairly peaceful? You can hear birdsong, the sounds of the countryside. Or do you want to show that his life is frantic, that his life is full of stresses? And instead you've got a soundscape of a city. You've got the sounds of traffic and the feel that he's in a polluted, busy environment. Do you want to show, and we'll talk about diegetic and non-diegetic in just a moment, but this one you'll see is a bit different. Do you want to show that he's going to suffer terribly on his way to work? Or finally, do you want to show that he's going to meet his dream partner, the love of his life that day? and that rather naff piece of music to make my point. But you see that you choose sounds and music to create a certain impression of location, for example, the countryside, a city, but also mood there. For example, a foreboding sense of doom about the day he's going to have, or a wonderful sense of joy about the person that he's about to meet. And all that is achieved by a sound designer, of course, working really closely with the director to make sure that you are ultimately meeting the director's creative vision for whatever this theatre production is. Okay, now you can use sound to adjust the meaning within a scene. So all these are really slightly 4 different scenes, really, aren't they? But let's say we've got one scene and you're a sound designer. And so what you're doing is going to be a bit more subtle. It might be, we talked about Hedda Gabler last week. It's a lady in her home, she's quite wealthy. And if you want to create a certain sense of mood, well, think about what the weather's doing. And so you might have a howling wind or driving rain, or it might, and that would suggest a certain mood about the scene. And that's helped by the sound, of course. What volume do you have certain sound effects playing at? You could think about having the sounds of birds singing at quite a low volume, suggesting a calm and a peace. But if you turn that volume right up, actually it becomes much more invading on that character, much more like it's putting pressure on the character almost. So just by changing the volume, you can change the mood of that scene. And then you can layer sound effects. If you've got 5 or 6 sound effects playing at once, we'll talk about soundscapes in a few minutes, then you can think about which ones are loudest, which ones play for the longest, which ones are just there on their own, okay? So you can use sound to adjust meaning by thinking about which sound effects you have, what volume they're playing at, and how you layer them, how you play them one on top of the other, potentially. Okay, interpretation. I'll put that slide on every single thing we do here, because remember, there are no answers that are guaranteed. A playwright might write that the weather is something, or this music is playing in the background, but again, you have choices about how that sound effect is played, the volume, the layering, when it starts, etc. So your interpretation and you thinking about what you want to communicate to an audience is still very relevant. Okay, so step 1, you're thinking, as a sound designer, what do you want to show? And the first line of your PE paragraph there might be, as a sound designer, I want to show that. And that might be that the character is comfortable in their environment, or that an awful event is going to happen shortly. So think about what you want to achieve as a sound designer. And then with sound, actually, what are the key decisions that you can make to achieve what you want to achieve, to communicate what you want to communicate? What things can you do? So you can use diegetic or non-diegetic sound. There's a slide, my next slide explains that in a bit more detail. So we'll come back to that. You can change the volume. You can have live and pre-recorded sounds, and you can put things into a soundscape and other things besides. But that's a good beginning to get you able to write fairly fluently about sound design. And then what can you show? So if we're looking at to achieve what, well, you can show location, where the character is, mood, the sort of mood and atmosphere within the scene. And I've seen exam questions that say, how do you use sound to communicate the location and mood, for example? So it could be both of those things. You could show that something's naturalistic or abstract, and more on that when we talk about diegetic and non-diegetic sound. Internal or external settings, if the character inside or outside, and if they're inside, what kind of environment are they in? Class and wealth, think about the music that might be playing, or the noise level in the background, what that might show. And then the time of day, potentially as well, birds singing, suggesting early morning, for example. Okay. Now, diegetic and non-diegetic sounds. So diegetic sound, I'll read this out, this definition. A sound whose source is visible on screen, or whose source is implied to be present by the action of the film. Now, this is clearly a film example, but you can extrapolate from that to the theatre as well. So when I played you that sound effect a moment ago of the countryside, all these sounds are believable, aren't they? All these sounds are, yes, we understand where they're coming from, and we understand that this is a bird singing. This is a sprinkler in the background. This is a different bird, perhaps walking around. Do you understand that all those sounds we can understand the character must be in a garden or in the countryside by a field, because all these sounds make sense. Whereas if someone is walking to work and everything's a bit creepy, these sounds are not really playing. We're not thinking that someone's walking behind that character with a bell or making some spooky sound effects with their mouth. So that's a non-diegetic sound, Okay, that second one there, the sound whose source is neither visible on the screen nor has been implied to be present in the action. So it's about creating atmosphere in a way where actually we don't question where it's coming from. We just buy into it, that it helps build a mood. That other example I showed was, the character meets the love of his life. And you'll have seen this in countless films, television programs, perhaps in the theatre, that when two characters are speaking and joking and they're starting to share a moment, it's like someone is turning the volume up on some violins in the background. None of us think that the violins are really there in the next room or with them, but we buy into it. We accept that that helps us to believe in the world and to believe in the emotions of these characters. So that's really key there. Diegetic and non-diegetic sound. The top one there, diegetic, sounds that are accounted for, that we know where they come from. Non-diegetic, we're not clear where they've come from, but they help to create the mood in some way. And that's really, really key, okay? Let's just to hammer home that point a little bit here. I've just got some examples I want you to try and put in this table. So a doorbell, we'll do the first one together. A doorbell ringing, okay? That's very unlikely to be a sound that helps to create atmosphere. It's going to be a sound that makes us think someone's at the door, that this is a naturalistic play and someone's arrived at the door. So that would go in the left-hand column there. The doorbell ringing would go in the left-hand column there. Could you just spend a few seconds just looking at the others and trying to put them in the left or right column? I'll be silent for 20 seconds. So that first one we did together, the doorbell ringing, is a diegetic sound that goes on the left. Rain howling. Again, unlikely to be something for mood. It's likely to be telling us that it's raining outside. Diegetic sound goes on the left-hand side here. Okay, next one, violins slowly increasing in volume. Well, it's unlikely that that's going to be a realistic thing where violins are slowly getting louder and louder. It's more likely to be that that's non-diegetic. That what we're trying to do there is create the mood, perhaps of romance in the air. The noise in Jaws, the film Jaws, as the shark attacks. You might know what I'm talking about. You can look it up if not. It's a very famous sound effect of a shark attacking, but that's not a noise that the shark makes. That's the lines of some violins going dun dun. We know that sound is not really happening, but it helps us create a fear for the life of the person on the screen. So that's a non-diegetic sound. The sound in Psycho, it's a very famous Alfred Hitchcock film, as the lady is murdered in the shower. We hear a ee, as the lady's murdered. No one's actually making that sound, but it helps that that evokes in us a feeling of fear and dread for what's happening to this woman. That is a non-diegetic, i.e. a non-naturalistic sound. And finally, the sound of the radio playing might be for a scene in a kitchen. There's someone singing along to their radio in the kitchen. That sound is accounted for. We know it's coming from. It's a diegetic sound. So I hope that clearly shows you the differences between those diegetic and non-diegetic, and something that you can now talk and write fluently about in your essays and exam questions about sound. Okay, there you are. So there's the answer there. Volume. Volume is self-explanatory, but you can think if I'm playing something loudly or quietly, or if it gets louder or gets more quiet and moves perhaps to total silence as we go through, that clearly can communicate some meaning about the scene and about what you're trying to say about the character or about the plot. Now, as something to throw in here in your writing, it's just about whether your sound is live or pre-recorded. In many cases, it will be pre-recorded, of course, but you should understand, if you don't already, that in theatres, in front of the front row of the stalls, you will have an orchestra pit. So you will have, especially in proscenium arch theatres, you will have a conductor there with a small orchestra, and they'll be playing music. So if there is music being played, especially in a piece of musical theatre, that will play live from the stalls. And when you applaud everyone at the end, big round of applause, you will also be applauding the people who played the music throughout. Much of what you'll be writing about more likely in your essays and exams is about how you're going to create sound design using pre-recorded sounds. And so that's that picture of the sound desk where all those sound effects are mixed, okay? But certainly you can mention whether you're using live or pre-recorded sound. And then soundscape. So soundscape really is where you have more than one sound playing simultaneously. So if I wanted to create a soundscape that's set in the jungle, okay, I'm going to have my bird singing. This is the toucan, I believe. So I'm going to have my bird my jungle bird here making a noise. Toucan, it's going to be singing. It's going to help to set the scene alongside some wind blowing through the trees and my little primate friend here making some good monkey noises. Okay, so that's sort of going to set the scene here. I might start with this bird and this monkey, and then have the wind sound effects increasing as we go through, which might help make people feel a bit, and it'll set the scene, but also help people maybe feel a bit uneasy about the weather, maybe evoke feelings of there's something not quite right here. I've then got sound effects of boots walking over some crackling sticks. So that's going to help to show that there are people in the scene, people in this situation, and then they're going to have gunfire. Okay, so that's my soundscape, which will start quite peaceful and move into something that's a bit more feeling of dread. But essentially, a soundscape is where you create a location through sound effects. Again, those are the 5 sound effects that I would use if I was building a soundscape of a jungle in this particular scene. Okay. Now, for designing, I've shown you this slide before, PEE paragraph for designing. And my point is, what do I want to communicate as a designer? Particular line or moment and a particular design element, in this case, sound. Evidence, how would I do it? So I describe my design. I would like this sound, volume up, volume down, soundscape, etc. And then when I explain, I'm justifying why making this point is important for the production. It's important to show that there's a dreadful about to happen because, and then analyze the impact it would have on the audience when you use the evidence above. So playing the sound effect at this volume would help the audience to X, Y, and Z. Okay. To give a bit of an example here, my example PEE paragraph. So I've also indicated how I'm layering my soundscape. And then finally, I would use silence for 5 seconds before the sound of gunfire ends the scene. So I think in quite a concise way, in about 3 sentences, I think I've given some quite clear evidence about really, I painted a picture of my sound design, about how it would build up and how those sounds would change. And then how I have silence. And please do mention silence in a question about sound design. Silence is vital. What you shouldn't say is, I'm not going to have any sound in this scene because I wanted to hear the actor talking. Clearly, you're not helping yourself get any marks with that kind of answer. And I've read that kind of answer as a teacher quite a lot. So you've got to use sound, but of course, silence is part of sound. Okay, the absence of sound is important. And then with my explain here, I would say it's important to show the damage caused by humans within this play. So I've just sort of justified my point there. Showing a high contrast in the sounds of nature and mankind demonstrates this damage clearly. So I'm just going into a bit more detail about why that evidence makes sense and is appropriate. Contrasting this through volume helps to show the dominance of humans over the natural world in this case, i.e. simply my sound effects related to humans, the boots on the sticks and the gun, are going to be louder than nature sound effects. Okay, that's a very simple point really, but I'm saying that it's the dominance of humans over the natural world in this case. And then finishing off, the silence immediately before the gunshot will create an anticipation in the audience. Always important to talk about your audience here. A foreboding sense of something negative about to take place. So again, I don't think this is rocket science. I think what I've done is just said, I want to use sound to achieve this. Okay, show about humans being dominating really, and not in a positive way. I've just given a bit of evidence of what I do as a sound designer, and then my explanation paragraph justifies and mentions, sort of relates it to the audience there. If you'd like to see a bit more about sound design, I've put a couple of links on here from different sound designers. So one is from the play Frankenstein, and it's the sound designer talking about the process of creating a sound design. And then it's a couple of sound designers from the musical Wicked. So if musical theatre is more your thing, and of course sound design is absolutely vital to a musical, then there's a really nice video of how they go about their process of creating sound design, but also really making the point that it's a bit more complex than just playing the music at the right time. It's more complex than that. So those are some couple of links there for you to go and see. And if you'd like to complete a task, I've asked you to imagine a scene in which a character goes into a busy restaurant. How could you use sound to show the environment in the restaurant, i.e. that it's busy, that it's bustling? How would you change the sound when he meets his blind date and instantly falls in love? Write a PEE paragraph explaining this. And then trying to incorporate the difference between diegetic and non-diegetic sounds. So we've talked about that a bit through this video. Go back and look at some sections if you need a reminder of what that means. But we're looking at the difference between diegetic sounds where the source is clear, and non-diegetic sounds, i.e. sounds where we don't know where that sound is coming from. I hope that's been a really useful introduction to sound design for people, and I look forward to seeing you again tomorrow to look at a different aspect of theatre design. Thanks very much, Lois. back over to you.
Really appreciate it, Gary. Thanks a lot. What does the rest of the day find? What does the rest of the day find you doing?
Just a bit of catching up with work, a bit of hanging out with my children, and a bit of enjoying the sunshine. It's all good, and it's a 4-day week, so even better.
I really like your lockdown beard. It's coming on leaps and bounds.
Thanks very much.
All right, have a great day.
What else is there to do? Doing my best.
Catch you soon, buddy.
Take care. Thanks very much.
Bye. Okay,
Bye-bye.
Nish, so we've got one more lesson today.
Ooh.
It's on your screen, my dear.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay.
So, Gary did go through the task. I will put it up on YouTube and Facebook as well. If you've missed out on any of the sessions, please catch up on them. They are really interesting. Yeah, next we have ESL.
Brilliant.
Our last for the day.
Wonderful. I'll see you in 5 minutes.
Let's see you in 5.